Yes, I've started the recording. We can start the lecture.
Yeah. Should I begin? May I begin?
Yes, sir. Yes, yes.
So I thank my friend Dilip Chavan and SRM University for inviting me to deliver this talk about Foucault.
Yeah. Good evening to
Uh,
all of you.
this is part of the series. Yeah.
I welcome you all to this lecture, which is dedicated to, I think,
चव्हाण सर तुम्ही नेटवर्कमध्ये नाही आहात त्यामुळे सुरुवात व्हायला हे होत आहे. अ, चव्हाण सर आपला नेटवर्कचा इश्यू आहे.
I I was trying to make some preliminary remarks, but then suddenly Rahul started.
So sorry.
Uh, am I audible? Am I audible to you all?
Now audible.
Yes,
Yeah.
sir, you are
Yes,
audible.
sir.
Yes, sir,
Yes,
you are
sir. You are
audible.
audible.
I just wanted to make a small announcement that this is a lecture series which will go on till the end of this calendar year. This happens to be the birth centenary of Michel Foucault, we all know. And needless to say, that Foucault has been extremely important and relevant to our times for many reasons. So, without wasting time, I would request Rahul to start with his presentation. And every lecture will be held on the 15th of every month. 15th happens to be Foucault's date of birth, but we don't essentialize this part just for the sake of convenience, and we can easily remember 15th as a date. So this time and date are fixed. So we will have 8 to 10 different scholars from across India. This has nothing to do with any organization or ideology. We don't want to propagate anything through this. There is no organization. I will no longer be in the frame from the next lecture. This is just an attempt to understand Foucault, and uh, most importantly, we all admire Foucault, but we also have differences with Foucault. So this is the most beautiful part of understanding Foucault. So I'm sure that we will enjoy this series and this lecture also. So I request Rahul to start, please.
Yeah. Thank you, Dilip. Thank you for asking me to start this series of lectures on Foucault. And that is, though it is going to be the first part of the series, in no way it is an inaugural lecture. In no way it is going to shape the course of the series. It is just my attempt to share of this seminal in post-structuralist thought. Having said that, let us uh, be very clear about this that Foucault thou has been used by the progressive movement, uh, especially the movements of the marginalized people. Yet, Foucault is not a leftist or a Marxist in any way. In fact, he had issues with Marxism, like all post structuralists have, and he believes that Marxism is also a discourse which is shaped by a certain episteme which is unaware of its own structure. So, Foucault in no way is a Marxist, Marxist, though progressive people who generally would call themselves left of the center uh, use Foucault. So there is a uh, kind of a conflict of interest here, kind of a contradiction here. And in a way, it is also a revelatory of the progressive thought, the aporias of the progressive thought, the dilemmas of the progressive thought, that this thought is, though mm, though against the tradition, against the status quo, is not in favor of any kind of fundamental change, fundamental uh, upheaval and formation of new society, because it does not believe in that kind of thing. Uh, it is only a reformist thought. And perhaps the roots of that reformism can be located in the, the structure which inform the modern progressive thought. And these structures are post structural or postmodern philosophies of Foucault, Lacan, Derrida, and others. Uh, what all these philosophies have in common is a certain skepticism about man's agency, both as the knower and as the subject. And in a way, it is a kind of deconstruction, or in a way, it is kind of, unearthing of the foundations of man's certainties about objective knowledge and uh, agency of uh, a human being. In fact, man himself is a creation, is a construct, according to Foucault. And Foucault was primarily a historian of thought, and he's not in that sense a philosopher. I mean, one can look at him as a philosopher because he deals with philosophical issues, but he would rather historicize and try to destabilize these philosophical debates than engage in philosophical discourse as a participant. So he takes a position outside philosophy, and from the perspective of a historian, uh, not a typical historian of ideas, but a kind of a, what should we say, kind of a person who would like to analyze the entire, and he gives himself a huge task uh, of revealing, exposing the entire modern thought itself. So the thought of enlightenment onwards, thought of 18th century and 19th century and 20th century. So he unearths the roots of that thought and shows its mm, sense of liberation from tradition, liberation from the past as something very fragile and something very fickle. So it is, uh, we say, for example, I'm trying to relate what Foucault is saying to our day to day concerns in Maharashtra. Uh, so, though we would like to position ourselves as modernists, and we oppose all the traditional and historical structures such as caste system, the religion, the faith, institutionalized religion, Uh, we are advocates of modern science, scientific perspective, rationality, uh, and we do believe that human beings are not just uh, subject to the fate or the destiny or God's will or uh, play of some transcendental power, but human beings are the finally, in the final analysis, makers of their own uh, lives and of their own society. So we generally, the progressive people in Maharashtra, believe in all this. And Foucault is a person who disturbs this belief. He questions our objectivity, our subjectivity, our sense of being an agent, our sense of being knowers of the world, uh, and any kind of certainties that there are. So he questions the modernity itself and makes it unstable, which is what all uh, post-structuralists do. And that's why they are, rather than allies, I mean, though paradoxically we use them as allies because we feel that, post-structuralists are talking in favor of, or I mean, those philosophies and Foucault himself was politically active and he took up races, he took up issues of races, he took up issues of alternative sexualities, and so on and so forth of the colonized people. Mm, and still, Foucault is a person who doesn't believe in the possibility of this kind of radical politics because he believes that radical politics also is part of the same episteme that the institutions are, the established institutions are. So that's why Foucault is an interesting figure. Now, all of us now Foucault primarily because the kind of influence he has had on uh, the entire kind of dialogue in the academia and in the real politics of Orientalism and what is called neo-colonialism, so or post-colonialism, and also in Indian context, the influence, the text of Frederick Jameson Orientalism had on subaltern group or the movement subaltern movement. So which is a kind of a runaway fraction of the left and which is in antipathy with the left. So this is the kind of uh, practical outcome of Foucauldian philosophy, one would say. So, I mean, for example, Frederick Jameson in his, not Frederick Jameson, Edward Said in his, sorry, Edward Said in his Orientalism uh, uses Foucauldian idea of discourse, Foucauldian idea of archive, and Foucauldian ideas of episteme, and to map out how the idea of the non-West or Orient was created. And if you are familiar with post-colonial texts, then you would know that the way the entire East or the Orient was a creation, was a creation, uh, very careful creation uh, prior to the actual colonization or during the early stages of colonization, imperialism, and it was justificatory of the imperial brutality, imperial arrogance, and it was a kind of uh, act of, I mean, where the Foucauldian idea that knowledge is power and power is knowledge, kind of becomes very historically substantiated. So that is what you see in Orientalism. And Orientalism is an out and out applied Foucault, and that's how one initially kind of uh, initially uh, confronts Foucault's ideas. I mean, Foucault has become, important because of the entire post-colonial discourse for us. So one has to realize that. Uh, Now, the post-colonial discourse and post-colonial politics, as you know, as I said earlier, is primarily a critical kind of a politics. It is not uh, a kind of mass uh, politics of total change, as much as a fringe politics of the marginalized or subaltern or the disenfranchised groups. So it is the politics of tribals, it's the politics of castes and politics of women. And it is there where the post-colonial thought generally thrives, and that is not a surprise. If you understand Foucault, then you will know why post-colonial thought is basically a kind of a, I mean, it is bound to be a fringe of the uh, progressive uh, movements which want to change the structure, social structures. And it is bound to remain to be fringe, or it is happy in being the fringe. It is never going to be the mainstream because it uh, basically um, has a kind of critical relation with the mainstream. It doesn't have, a complementary relation with that. Uh, Now, to go back to the title of this lecture, I read just some time back that I was supposed to talk about Foucault's life also, because since this is the first lecture of the series, I'm not, I mean, life of Foucault is readily available on internet. If you Google search Foucault, you would get to know all the dates and the basic information about that. So I'll not go much I mean, I'll not spend much time talking about his life as such, but to make a beginning, I'll be talking about his intellectual journey. It's early Foucault and the influences that he had had. So, Foucault, uh, you know that he went to École Normale Supérieure and he met Althusser, who was an important influence on him, and similarly Canguilhem, who was a professor of history of science there. Uh, and he, uh, because of these people, came to know that, history of science is not history of progress. It is not a history of kind of linear development. It's not a history of accumulation of knowledge, but it is a history riddled with many accidents, chances, uh, many past struggles, and it is a discontinuous history. There are lots of epistemological breaks. So, uh, I mean, there is not kind of, progress in the history of science. I mean, now you would realize that this thought, which he borrowed from Canguilhem, became very important for him when he deals with history of madness and history of modern medicine and history of philosophy, because these are the areas in which he has contributed so much. He for a while toyed with Marxism. He joined Communist Party, but he soon left. Uh, Another influence on Foucault was Bachelard, who was also a philosopher of science, and uh, the entire kind of uh, entire inclination or entire kind of temptation that Foucault always had was that of historicizing things. I mean, just to give one example, as against Freudian psychoanalysis, there were in Foucault's vicinity two psychologists. One was Binswangen and another was Kuhn, and they were influenced by Heidegger a little. Foucault too himself was influenced by Heidegger, and instead of doing the analysis of the unconscious, they did what is called the sane analysis, or where they believe that dreams are not symbolic, but they are actual experiences, and uh, the madness is just an ill consciousness. The patient knows his condition, so it is. I mean, uh, it is not kind of unearthing of the true self which is repressed, as Freud and Freudians and the entire psychoanalytic movement till Lacan, who is a post-structuralist and who uh, claims or who posits that self is a fiction. So, unlike the classical, psychoanalysts, these psychologists said that one can't have preconceived kind of typology such as hysteria or schizophrenia and apply it to the patients, but the patient's psychological trauma is a result of real conditions. So his existential condition, his being thrown in the life, is what one has to look at. So this is what I mean. These are the influences that Foucault had, and with from Althusser, and through Althusser, he went to Saussure, and he started looking at the knowledge as structures. So, structures which are, I mean, knowledge is not, kind of, ideas that you get, but these are creations of uh, historical creations in a society, which are which shape your sense of knowledge or your feeling that you know. So that is what uh, structuralism was all about. And Foucault, as a structuralist, I mean, in early days, tried to uh, tried to unearth the structures beneath various fields or disciplines, such as psychology or psychoanalysis, the notion of madness, notion of psychiatry, notion of philosophy, notion of normal people lacked in life, in insight, in you know, in the world, in nature. So madness was associated with a kind of spatial knowledge, sacred knowledge. Now, the distinction that was made during the Enlightenment was a watershed event. So it is what Foucault would call an epistemic break, a rupture, because for him, history of knowledge is not progressive; it is a discontinuous history. So here, what happens is the uh, something new, completely new emerges. And how does that emerge? So he does a very patient kind of study of institutions such as madhouses or psychiatric hospitals, and shows us how discipline was born out of these practices rather than other way around. So it is not the case that human beings or the society, Western society, developed a better knowledge of psychology, and on that knowledge, the institutions, psychiatric institutions, were founded. But it is the other way around. First, the institutions came into being. First, the mad peoples were segregated and kept aside, and then the knowledge of psychology grew in the modern form. And how does that happen will be uh, will be what I'll be talking about in the next few minutes. So this he says that uh, madness, where it was undifferentiated initially, but later on, as the reason or human beings associated themselves as, or they conceived themselves of themselves as knowers, and that happened with Kantian kind of you know epistemological revolution. So as human beings looked at themselves as subjects of knowledge and as basically people who exercise their reason to know the world, the monologue of reason began. Reason became hegemonic, and madness was silenced. Madness was first pushed aside, was isolated, was uh, imprisoned into uh, certain localities of modern society, such as madhouses or prisons, and then the reason held sway over all discourses. And madness was considered to be something which is the other of reason. So initial psychopathology had no knowledge of what madness was. It assumed the distinction between madness and the reason. The period that Foucault says this happened was between 1654 to 1794. So these nearly 150 years is where madness becomes institutionalized. In the initial phases, mad people, all the people who were uh, disjointed with the social norms, such as unemployed people, people who were vagrants, who were moving around without any useful uh, work, poor people, criminal people, just lazy people, idle people. So all of them were clubbed together, all of them were grouped into, uh, and they were considered to be a bane to the society, considered to be infectious, bad influences. And that's why they were put into madhouses or uh, houses for the idle or houses for the loafers. Okay. And this confinement of mad people, of vagrant people, poor people, concept of panopticon, which is uh, a concept that Foucault is well known for. So the idea of supervised life, as if these people were immature, they were children, and they had to be retrained into better adjustment to social life. So there was no physical punishment, there was no brutalizing restraint, as would be the case perhaps in the earlier periods. But it was a systematic form of control, routine activities. There were threats of punishment which worked better than actual punishment. And there was enforcement of particular moral values which were gradually internalized by the inmates of such houses. So this madness was observed, it was studied, and this gave birth to psychiatry. It didn't happen that you knew what madness was. It was just clubbing randomly some people together, considering them to be eccentrics, considering them to be their behavior to be strange, and then observing them, finding certain commonalities between them, and slowly uh, discipline, uh, knowledge discipline of psychology was born. Now, mad people were supervised by medical doctors. Okay, so uh, doctors, I mean, it was considered to be a kind of, a neurological, physiological kind of a, aberration. And this madness was uh, supervised closely, intimately by the doctor. But that intimacy was not symmetrical, it was not reciprocal. The mad person could not intimate the person, the normal person, the doctor. There was no reciprocity in that interaction. Okay, so the doctor was given a privilege to observe that mad person from very close quarters. Now, this is very unfair. I mean, if we believe in the modern values of privacy, this was the breaking of the right to privacy of that poor person who was incarcerated. So, through the order of observations and classification, the madness was created. I mean, created as a kind of a type, as knowledge. This medicalization of madness was not a progress, it was an attempt to isolate it and prevent from infecting the city. Now, to go to the next area that Foucault, talked about, he talks about crime, madness, uh, illness, sexuality. I mean, all these are something things which are you know uh, taboo subjects or aberrations in society, and you know that he is uh, written long studies of all these four areas. So, birth of prison, birth of clinic, and madness and civilization, history of sexuality. So these are his works. Now, when these medical personages utilized surveillance and judgment, then the process of the medical knowledge of the mind began, and it was not other way around. Medicine was, according to Foucault, the first scientific discourse concerning the individual. And this is how all human sciences were born. So, human sciences are indebted to medicine because this is where the conception of individual is born. Conception of man as both subject and object of knowledge. Earlier, in the initial stages in Renaissance, in medieval times, the medicine was basically classificatory. I mean, there were there was classification of diseases into genus and the species of each genera, and it was medicine of or medical knowledge of the species. Now, each patient, I mean, if patient had acquired, for example, a certain, he was a case of say bile, or if it was case of he was a phlegmatic kind of person, then his individual kind of individual onset of that particular uh, disease was to be ignored, was to be subtracted, because the idea of diagnosis was to find out the basic class of illness that a patient suffered from. From this, medicine evolved into medicine of symptoms, and then finally, as we have it today, it is the medicine of which is anatomical and clinical. Now, how did this transformation take place? This transformation took place, according to Foucault, uh, because of certain changed conception of what death is. Earlier, a patient, when a patient died, a person died, it was assumed that his illness or his disease also ended with him. Okay. So the death was the limit of disease, limit of knowledge about disease, limit of knowing the truth about disease. Okay. Now, in the modern conception of medicine, that is 18th, 19th century conception of medicine, the uh, death or analysis of dead bodies, of corpses, gave a vantage point, an analytical vantage point to understand what life is. So, death, which is outside in Derridian terms, which is a kind of center, is always outside its structure. So, so death, which is outside life, gave knowledge of life itself, knowledge of disease, things that affect life. Okay. So, as the experience of madness gave you knowledge of mind, knowledge of what is sane. Similarly, the integration of death gave developed the knowledge of medicine. Now, you can go deeper into this since this is an introductory lecture. I will not go much deeper in this. Now, what Foucault is generally doing, he is creating, he is looking at knowledge not as of any discipline, knowledge in any discipline, as a kind of storehouse of facts, as storehouse of truths, but he's looking at it as a discourse. looking at it as a discourse. So, uh, what? So for him, medicine or philosophy or political science or even physics are not, a, a kind of, institutionalized uh, inquiry after the truths of the nature, but they are discourses. They are discursive practices. What are discursive practices? These are a kind of, so basically it is the language. I mean, again, you would know that all post structuralists are basically language philosophies. They convert the ontological, existential things to their linguistic kind of, reality. For them, language is real, and the world, in that sense, is unreal. So, what is a discourse? So, discourse is a, a kind of a system of statements, system of types of statements, system of concepts and thematic choices. And to uncover this system, which is marked by order, correlations, positions, you know. So, where do you pose a particular fact? Is it a core fact of the science or the peripheral fact? What are the correlations between various, what are the equations? What are the correlations? What are the derivations between various, statements? And how the transformations are possible from one, uh, you know, thought to another. So there are rules of that, and such rules create a discursive kind of a space. So, to understand something as a discourse, first of all, mm, you have to dethrone certain ideas such as tradition, continuity, influence, and development, etc. Okay, so that is what uh, Foucault's general method is. So he shows you what is the discourse of madness, what is the discourse of criminality, what is the discourse of sexuality, what is the discourse of health and illness, and so on, so forth. So this is what he basically his project is. In the archaeology of knowledge or order of things, as the book is called, he says that all knowledge disciplines create an archive, which is a general system of the formation and transformation of statements. So, and what is an archive? How is an archive? Like, for example, Orientalism is basically an archive about Arab people or about Indian people. So, what does this archive consist of? It consists of set of rules which determine what can be expressed within that archive. So, what can be spoken? What is a valid knowledge and what is invalid knowledge? What statements are to be allowed? What statements are to be repressed? What statements are to be reused? For example, when Britishers created the entire kind of Oriental library, entire repository of the wisdom of the East, they reused certain texts and repressed certain other texts. So these early Indologists were Sanskrit scholars, Arabic scholars, Tamil scholars, etc. So they allowed certain things and disallowed certain other things. And some things were considered to be questionable. Then it is archive also deals with the conservation of knowledge. Certain knowledge is to be conserved, certain continuities are to be seen. And so, there is no room for, accidents. So it is a kind of, a fabricated system of knowledge. You have to realize this. So any field doesn't give you objective knowledge. It is a fabrication. It is a creation. It is artificial. All knowledge is artificial. All knowledge is motivated knowledge. There is not impartial, neutral, objective knowledge of anything at all. So, what are the continuities? Now, both progressive people and regressive people, anti progressive people, use these continuities. So, we would say that, we have got continuities of the oppressed thought. And those would, there would be master narratives, continuities of master narratives. Who has the access to this archive? Who can study this archive? So, a kind of, analysis of all these rules create archaeology of knowledge of any field or any discipline. Okay. So, this is what Foucault's major kind of, effort is in his, uh, you know, corpus in his work. And I think, this is enough uh, for this evening. Uh, I gave you a kind of, my take on what Foucault is. You would have opportunity to listen to other speakers who would deal in depth with perhaps some of the areas that I talked about or some of the areas that I did not talk about. So thank you, Dilip, once again for inviting me for this lecture. Uh, it gave me an opportunity to reread Foucault, to understand him again, and certainly he's an important thinker. I feel that one has to uh, bring a fair and just summary of what he says in Marathi too, and this lecture would mm, make me start on that project. So thank you, Dil.
Thank you, Rahul. Can we have a couple of questions?
Certainly, certainly.
Yeah, please feel free to ask. Unmute yourself and ask.
Uh, Sir, good evening, sir.
Yes.
Lecture was very insightful, and we really thankful to you and the organization. As sir told, there is no such organization, but I thanks Chavan sir and you also. I actually there is one word madness you explain elaborate. I would like to ask one question in the sense that nowadays in medical science, Foucault explore many things. How madness we can understand in present context or in social context. Like there are many. Is it a social phenomena or it is created for the power structure?
Yeah. Uh, I think you've hit the nail on the head. Madness, I mean, to give you a very plain kind of straight answer without caveats,
Yeah.
madness is a creation. I mean, it is a classification which is suitable for the present structure. Because, I mean, all people mean, there is nobody, I mean, in ideal society, people are not identical. People are not like each other. So each person is different. Now, certain differences are considered to be not pardonable, not allowed. Certain differences are considered to be a label to be mad, and they are to be excluded from normal. Such people are excluded from normal life. If you remember, I mean, I certainly remember because now I'm a 60-year-old man. So even in my childhood, so as late as 1970s, mad people were allowed to stay in the house with the family.
Yes, yes, correct, correct,
There was no exclusion. There was no separate place for them. You know,
correct, correct.
their differences were tolerated, and they were different. And some were people who were retarded. Some were, mentally challenged. Some people had, perhaps fits. Some people, other people had hysteria, whatever. And in my childhood, I remember they were perhaps taken to some temple or some dargah or some church, and they were, some ash was perhaps sprayed across their temples, but generally they were tolerated. They were, and they were also happy, and that variety was considered to be normal. But
Mm.
as I have grown, I mean, even in my lifetime, which is not a very long lifetime, just 60 odd years, so I see more and more intervention of psychiatry, of drugs, and which are basically, as I understand it, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a medical expert, but which are drugs which suppress or which quieten or which kind of take the edge out of the spontaneous behavior of people. So it dulls their consciousness, it dulls their brains. So
Yes,
generally, putting unwanted people to sleep, or make them as inactive and dull as possible. So that seems to be the kind of answer that modern medicine has discovered. I mean,
yes,
it doesn't realize that all of us contain certain strange, you know, attitudes, strange behaviors, strange habits. You know, now what it wants is just right.
yes, yes. Absolutely, sir. I got the point. Means it's a power structure of the political power structure who made this exclude the person
Yes,
for a period of time. Yes.
yes,
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
yeah,
इथं नाही थांब आता माझं झालं नाही झालं किती कमी राहिलं shall I?
yeah.
Yeah, it's a Kishore Gaikwad. Sorry, my throat has gone very bad. It is in the context of archaeology of knowledge,
Yeah.
and the I think exact title is archaeology of knowledge and the discourse on language. Okay,
Yeah.
it is you know uh, from archaeology viewpoint and the knowledge production viewpoint.
Yeah.
As we conceive, most of the Foucault from the viewpoint of you know alignment of powers and charmed group in the society and circulation of a particular kind of knowledge production reproduction of the same knowledge,
Hmm.
but from that viewpoint we always overheard a bit criticism about Foucault, like he's just speaking about flaunting orders or just criticizing, established kind of power relations as such, and doesn't provide any alternative. So,
Hmm.
from archaeology view of knowledge viewpoint, uh, is there any kind of discussion directly, indirectly pertaining to Foucault
Hmm.
about the variety of knowledges as such?
Uh,
Variety or types of knowledge? Yeah, please.
Look, I mean, Foucault is, as I said, is basically a historian of knowledge.
Mhm.
So he would kind of, he would expose. He's basically a critical, what is considered to be critical philosophy or critical thought. So in that sense, he will not give you an alternative action. Okay, he doesn't have any program. Okay, but he shows what is hegemonic, what is dominant for what it is. Okay, so the institutionalized power structures which support knowledge formation and sustenance, those institutionalized power structures are what Foucault is exposing, what Foucault is, bringing to your attention. And he is, in that sense, a relativist. Okay, he doesn't believe in the progress of humanity as such. Okay, because he is a Nietzschean. I mean, basically, you have to realize that Foucault is by far most influenced by one philosopher, and that is Nietzsche. And Nietzsche, was a person who did not believe in any of the enlightenment values of progress or enlightenment confidence in the betterment of man. So, this Nietzschean, and Foucault himself says that he is a Nietzschean through and through. He himself admits that he is basically the disciple of Nietzsche. He is continuing the work that Nietzsche did. So there he is not going to give you a liberating program of alternative knowledge or alternative action. He is going to expose, even in the liberatory discourses, he is going to show how power structure affects that too. And that's why he is critical of Marxism. He is critical of, all the organizations, whether they are uh, status quo organizations or oppositional organizations.
Okay. Thanks, Professor Rahul. Thanks.
Hello. Hello.
Hello. Yeah.
Am I audible, sir?
Yes, you are.
Yeah. Good evening, sir.
Good
Sir,
evening.
this is Urmila.
Yeah.
Uh, sir, thank you so much. Sir, it's indeed a treat for my ears after a long time, sir.
Yeah. After a long time. Yeah.
And yes, sir. Sir, I wanted to ask you a question regarding like your initial talk. You have mentioned about women politics.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I wanted to know that what kind of politics Foucault is talking about. And next is it related to feminism? And if it is related to feminism, then what kind of politics he is talking about?
Yeah. Urmila, it is nice to hear your voice after nearly 20 odd years. Okay.
Yes, sir. Yes,
Uh,
sir.
but I am sorry I can't answer that question because Foucault has been studied by feminists and there are books which connect Foucault with feminism, but I haven't studied that yet. Okay,
Okay.
so this can
Okay.
be a suggested topic for one of the lectures in this series where Foucault and feminism will be discussed. Okay, and
Yes, sir.
yeah, and I even I will now I've decided to continue this study of Foucault. So within a few weeks, I'll also come across that area. So perhaps we can discuss then. Huh? Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
Yes, sir. Thank you so much.
yeah, thank you.
Good evening, sir. I have a question for you. I'm Siddhant.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, when you were talking about continuity, discontinuity, and rupture,
Hmm?
can you hear me, sir? Is my voice audible to you?
Uh, it would be better if you talk louder.
Okay, yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You were talking about discontinuities and ruptures.
Rupture, yeah. So when Foucault is talking about rupture, so my question is that is a specific rupture always very radical? Does the rupture seem to be very fresh? Or let's say a specific break would involve maybe, let's say, containing some older elements of a previous discourse, and then when we move on to a newer age where the rupture happens, can those elements of a previous discourse be retained and carried on into the newer one? Does it get reorganized? That's the question.
Okay, as far as I've understood Foucault, he basically deals with 18th and 19th century where the origins of modern knowledge are located, and these modern systems of knowledge and also our modern lifestyle and our frame of mind has very little room for continuity. In fact, in continuity, or whether it is, I think what you are talking derives from Raymond Williams's model of emergent and residual and new. So uh, Foucault has got no room for. Foucault's scheme of things, in Foucault's scheme of the history of uh, enlightenment, he believes that there is no continuity. Continuity is an illusion that is created to make the present or new thing acceptable. Okay. Well, new knowledge is rupturous. It is product of a certain fracture because a completely new power structure wants to emerge. And so, in that sense, perhaps one can connect Marx with Foucault, because in Marx's scheme of history also there are no continuities. There are conflicts and emergence of a completely new dispositions. So this is what Foucault, for Foucault there are no continuities whatsoever. Okay, I suppose now there are no more questions. So thank you for inviting me, for this, giving me opportunity to read Foucault, and it was very pleasant talking to all of you. I hope to meet you again sometime in this series. Thank you, organizers, and thank you, all the listeners.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.